Good afternoon, everyone. We'll get started here in just a moment. Give everyone an opportunity to get in to the meeting here. Should start incorporating some music here, during our wait time. Jazz it up a little bit. Get a thumbs up from somebody. Okay. Very good. Well, we would like to record today's event so that we can send that out to anyone who wasn't able to join live. Just want to make sure everyone's okay with that. If you're not, just go ahead, raise your hand in the toolbar at the top. And okay. Looks like we're good to record. So I'm going to go ahead and start that. So, okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Happy Thursday. We are recording today's call, and today's session is going to be Kelly Kaysen as your presenter, and he'll be presenting on advanced tips, tricks, and techniques for Canvas apps leveraging PowerFX. And in today's session, you will learn advanced gallery filtering, responsive formulas, patch and error handling, and working with collections. We do aim to provide a digital event today that respects all individuals. We ask that everyone assist in providing a welcoming and safe environment. We do bring 3 of these events to our customers each month. And so if you have a topic you'd like us to present on in the future, feel free to drop that in the chat today, and we'll take that into consideration into the schedule. To minimize any distractions, background noises, we are going to leverage a chat for questions during the presentation. So go ahead, drop your question there. We've got folks on standby to answer those questions while Kelly's presenting. We will also open the lines at the end if we have some time left over, so you can answer questions, ask questions live as well. Tomorrow or Monday, you'll receive an email from me with a recording so that you can share it out with others or re-listen if you would like. If you don't wish to receive those emails from me in the future, just go ahead and reply back, and I'll take you off that list. It'll be coming from devictor@microsoft.com. So with that, I will go ahead and hand it over to Kelly, and you can get us started. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Deb. I fear that no matter how many times I lead this session or contribute to the session, I cannot match up the slides to the talk track as you navigate through. It's always a task for me. Well, thanks everybody for joining. I appreciate it. Here's the agenda for today's session. For those that are unaware, this is a part 2 session. So back in April, my teammate Tim Hanowich and Kurt Reynolds provided a session on PowerFX that sort of serves as the part 1. So I'm going to recap what was covered in that today, just so you're aware of what they covered, where to access that recording if you want to go back and view it. My focus today will be mostly on, what Deb mentioned. We're going to talk about variables, responsive formulas, patch function, error handling, bit of collections, a little bit of everything in the context of a couple of apps that I've built. So hopefully it will be a real live example beyond just, the introduction of these concepts. So as we recap that part 1 session, this was a fantastic session, especially if you're curious about the origination of PowerFX. Tim is a fantastic storyteller, and he always puts it eloquently. And this session in particular was great as it, covered the foundational elements and the basis of where PowerFX came from and why it's important and why it became the language of choice, the low-code language for the Power Platform, right? It's inspired by Excel. So if you've used Excel previously, you probably recognize the syntax that PowerFX uses. And that's what has been incorporated into the platform. And some of the benefits that Tim covers are, the history and origin of it, but also, the low barrier to entry, right? The ability to understand it even if you don't have a professional development background. The fact that when you're working with Power Effects in the platform, it's always live. So it's unique that when you make a quick change, you see the results in real time. And, lastly, the seamless integration of Power Effects across the platform. It's not just Canvas apps that it's used in, it's Power Automate, it's on Dataverse tables, it's all throughout the platform. So it's one singular language that, once you build up that skill set, you can exercise that muscle in different areas. The second half of that session, delivered by Kurt, talks about a very specific Power Effects function, the parse JSON function. And so what that is for is to effectively parse out JSON data within your Canvas application to use the different fields. So if you're interested in that, this is a great session. You can leverage that function to work with different integrations to simplify data handling, or to simply enhance functionality if that's the type of data you're using. And the example that Kurt shares is he actually built a custom connector to a Star Wars API called Swappy, where he's pulling data in JSON format, leveraging the parse JSON function and parsing out that data and implementing it into galleries or different controls, right? So there's a little bit of calling a Power Automate flow from Canvas apps, leveraging a custom connector, and that parse JSON function that are all covered in part one. So we will make sure that that recording is linked for you in the chat as well as in the follow-up, so you can take a peek at that at your leisure. However, for today, we have some different content planned, and you're probably wondering why we're looking at a photo from me from almost 10 years ago in a gown that for some reason no one in my family told me I was supposed to iron myself. So, this is me graduating, and I graduated with a finance degree. Actually, I double majored in finance and Spanish, and I was pretty far away from the technology building. And, at the very end of my time at university, I got a call from a friend who needed to help build out a team at a startup. I was the fourth employee, and so that was the first job that I got, was at this tech startup, and I just pivoted entirely. And I started at ground zero of what it means to work at a technology company that builds mobile applications, right? The various different people and skill set that it takes to build out your database, to build out your functionality. We had to outsource the front end development. Then we needed some folks to help with testing. There's a lot that goes into that story and a lot of moving parts and a lot of deep skill set. And so, I got a little taste of each, right? I understood the whole process. And after 3 years there, I was fortunate enough to get an opportunity with Microsoft and kind of take that knowledge. And I was extremely fortunate to be introduced to the Power Platform. Because the Power Platform, I personally want to say thanks to, because I feel like I'm a perfect example of, what it allows you to do, and especially in the context of leveraging Power Effects, because I don't know professional development languages. I'm not writing custom code, but with Power Effects and the Power Platform, I myself individually can build, complex relational data models. I can automate repetitive tasks. I can integrate with third-party sources in the cloud, on-prem, do my own governance and ALM. And, lastly, and most importantly for today's session, is I can design robust, end-to-end, fully functional applications that are meaningful for myself, my teammates, my customers. I'll be sharing with you the solutions that I've built today. And so I just hope that, I'll be sharing with you what has helped me. And, ideally, if you can take one thing from today that helps you with your development on the Power Platform, I consider that a W. So with that, let's kind of cover the few topics that we're going to be diving into today. The first one is variables. So when we think about variables in the Power Platform and Canvas apps specifically, there's really two main ones. They kind of consider it three flavors depending on what you search. But the first one is a global variable. And as the name alludes to, you can use this globally throughout your application. It can be accessed from any screen at any point. And this is created using the set function. Set my global variable name, my value. It could be a text, a number, a record, whatever you want to set it to. Then you have a context variable. This is used in the context of your screen, and it's created using the update context function. So update context, And these are in squiggly brackets because it's in JSON format. And that's probably one of the first things you notice as a difference between the two. And that's because update context can update multiple variables at once. And the JSON format allows you to specify multiple key value pairs within a single call. But these are contextual to the screen that they are built on. If you built them on screen one, you can't access them on screen two. And then lastly, we'll talk a little bit about collections. Collections are similar to tables where we can store multiple records using the collect or the clear collect function and, called in different ways. You see one using JSON format here. This is a way to store data locally. You are not storing it in a data source. It needs to be rerun each time you run your application. The second piece that we'll talk about is responsive design. So, there's a lot that goes into making an application responsive, not just adjusting from a tablet to a phone, but, of course, these are desktop applications too. And maybe I'm using my laptop, maybe I'm using a 30-inch monitor. The experience is going to be different every single time. And so there's a couple different things that you'll want to incorporate into your development that go beyond the default container controls, which are extremely powerful and helpful. But we'll kind of talk about how you can supplement that with Power Effects today to do things where it's like, dynamic layouts going beyond screen templates and things like that. So custom X and Y properties, custom gallery sizing, thinking about font size as it changes from screen to screen, device to device. Same thing with image size and as well as visibility and conditional formatting. So hiding and showing things based on conditions to make the experience, really seamless for the end user. The last topic that we'll talk about is the patch function, and in addition to that, error handling with that, right? So when you think about the patch function, the purpose of it is to modify or create one or more records in a data source, right? So the functionality is we're updating either a single field or specific fields of a record without affecting other properties, right? So if I didn't want to patch an entire record, but maybe just a phone number, this is a nimble way to go about doing that as opposed to using the out-of-the-box form control. Other usage scenarios that I tend to use it for is, that performing on change, right? If you have an employee profile and you're just changing the email, and then the moment that value changes, you want to patch that record through. Handling forms that span multiple screens. And then if you're thinking about design, it's a little bit easier to customize your form layout if you're using the controls and then patching the record rather than the out-of-the-box form control, which is built a little bit more for speed. It's certainly very easy to use, but this kind of gives you that more flexible option if needed. So if we look at that broken out, the patch function, if we start with what it means to create a new record, you start with your patch function. Then you state your data source that you want to patch to. Then you use the defaults control, which signifies we're creating a brand new record. We are then restating our data source, and then we are choosing the fields that we want to patch. So if you look at that in Power Effects, it looks like this, right? We are calling our function patch to our data source customers. Defaults signifies that we are creating a new record. We're restating our data source, and then in JSON format, we are identifying our table and the value that we are patching to that table. Now that could be a static value as you see here in string, or you can, use like the value of a control or something like that. If you want to update an existing record, it's a very similar process, but instead of using defaults, we need to filter out to the record that we want to update. So it's just about identifying that singular record. So function, data source, filter, data source fields, and then that looks like this. Patching customers, filtering our customer's data source where name equals our value, right? So that's how we identify the individual record. And then again, in squiggly brackets, we're putting in the value that we want to patch. So that's just kind of give you a high level look at it. We're going to go in through several different real life scenarios here. All right, so we are in Microsoft Canvas apps, and this is a GCC environment. So everything that you see, or excuse me, a GCC tenant, and everything that you see done can be done in the government cloud. So first, we're going to start with a quick high-level overview of variables. The global variable button that we have here is going to, in the onSelect property, we're just going to set a couple basic things just to show you the differences in action. So I can say set global variable, comma, and then I give it my value. In this case, I'm going to give it, let's say, the color orange as my value. And if I come to this rectangle and I come to the fill property and I just, oh, actually I have to set this first. So you set it by selecting on select and then in fill, now we can just put the name of that global variable here. So it's going to respect that. And if I came to a second screen and I found a rectangle, I could call that global variable and it will be respected here as well. For a context variable, we use the update context function. We put our squiggly brackets here and we can do context variable is the name of our variable, colon, and then we can give this, let's say, a text value. We close that out. We select this to initiate it. We have a text box here in the text property, and now we do the context variable value, and it can show there. Now to show you, if we flip to another screen and I try to call that context value here, it's not going to show up, right? So it's only going to be available on the screen in which we have initiated it. So keep that in mind. And then lastly, we have the ability to make a collection. This is a local table, essentially. So if we did collect, you can also do clear collect, which starts a new collection every time it's run. And if you just do collection, it's just going to add to it if you continue to run it. So within our squiggly brackets, we can now do, a basic table here for John, and we'll do one more table called age, and we can do, 6. And so now if we come to our gallery here, just like we would if we were selecting Dataverse or SharePoint, we can come and find our collection and we can select that, my collection. So now that data is in here. And if I select my text box, just like I would with a gallery, I can do this item, and now it finds a name and age, right? I think I need to select this. There we go. So now we have our data. So those are basic examples of how to initiate them, but I want to show you them in the context of a real scenario. So let me show you this application that I have constructed for my users, my employees in my in my organization, right? And let's just go out to window size here so we can see it. There we go. And so this application is fairly interactive, but it's meant for me to be able to see my user data. So if I select, someone in this list, we now have a couple options that populate up here at the top. I can delete this record, I can view this record, but if I select another person, I lose the view button. That's because I designed it to, you can delete multiple people, but you can't view multiple people at the same time. So if I deselect, we now get our view option back. We can view their profile. And that's going to take me into the details of my selected user, right? I could see their org chart. I have different things like kudos if they've sent them. Looks like this person doesn't have any, but you get the idea that we are filtering and using variables to hide and show these options, not just these buttons, but the containers that contain the additional data. So let's build that functionality now. So I have a screen where I have removed that capability. So you can see by default, my button is visible. And if I select any of these folks, nothing changes based on the visibility of buttons. And so let's put that in now. So for starters, I also have a select all checkbox, which does nothing, right? But we want to make sure that when we select all, that all of these other checkboxes respect it. So if we highlight this checkbox on check, we want to set a variable called var select all. We're going to set it to true. Conversely, on uncheck, we want to set that same variable to false. So that way we can toggle it. Select all to false. And so now the way that we get these subsequent checkboxes to respect that is to put that variable in the checked property, right? So just var select all. So now we should be able to toggle these. Perfect. So just like that, you can select all or deselect all. Secondly, we want to make sure that when we select an individual record, that we are collecting this item from the gallery into a collection. So that way we can patch it through to the next screen to view their details. So on check, we want to first collect. And now we name our collection. And I just usually use like a prefix of col. That seems to be the standard nomenclature that people use. It works for me. This item. The second thing we want to do is if this item is in our collection, we want to set it as our variable of the selected user. So we're going to be able to use that selected user variable to store this record and patch it through so we can view data down the road, or we can patch items or records based on that. Okay. So that's set. But now on uncheck, we want to make sure that this item is removed from our collection, right? So now we have to make sure that in the on uncheck property, we remove from our collection called checked items, this item, just like that. So now if we select and unselect, you can see the button properties of the delete button is now respecting it. We're going to make sure that the view button does the same thing. So we select our view button. And firstly, in the visible property, right now it's just set to true, but we want to make sure that it only shows if we have one item checked. So count if col checked items true equals 1, and this var edit user variable. So edit user is the variable that we use to determine the visibility of the container where we're actually editing this user's details. Oops, equals false. So this is a container that I have. You could navigate to another screen. I'm just hiding and showing containers based on it. So if we find our other container, be this one. I think I'm in the wrong one here. But either way, we're going to show, we want to make sure that that only is visible if our edit user container is not visible. So now if we select this record, now we get our view button and we're good to go. So now we just have to make sure that when we select this view button, it respects the things that we want to hide and show. Because now our next step is we want to hide this container that contains the user list, and we want to show the profile view, rather container of this employee, right? So now if we find our button in the on select property, we're going to do a couple things. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to set var user list, which is used to hide this current container, the user list, to false. And we're going to set the var edit user to true, because we want to show that new container that has the other forms in it. Lastly, we want to set our selected user to the first item within our collection. Okay? So that's how we make sure that we're patching through the right record if people are selecting multiple and kind of going back and forth between checking and unchecking. And so now if we unselect, we have respect from our buttons. If we select multiple people, we have respect from our view button. And if we select view, it takes us into our new location to view the details of our employee. So that's sort of example one of how to leverage variables to hide and show, and to carry the record through after you select it, add it to a collection, and you want to use it subsequently, right? Because this data that you see here is not based on the gallery selected item. It's based on the person that we set as the selected user. So if I select this email, you can see the code up here is var.selecteduser.email address. So it just makes it a little bit easier to carry data from screen to screen and not being dependent on that item still being selected in your gallery. All right, so now let's talk about responsiveness. So there's a couple different things that I like to do, and there's probably a myriad of topics under responsiveness that we could cover. And that could certainly be another session that I deliver. My teammate Doug Bell has done a great one that is actually available as a recording. So if that's something you're interested in getting the foundational elements on, highly encourage you to check that one out. For today, I'm just going to talk about a couple tips and tricks that help me as it relates to responsiveness, mostly as it pertains to viewing and developing the application. So the first thing is, for those that are unaware, under settings and display, if you want your app to be responsive, you do have to turn off scale to fit. That is a must. It's on by default. So firstly, toggle that off. Secondly, one thing that I typically like to do is, if we look at this application, right? If I'm pulling this one up and we view it on my desktop, and I have a 27-inch screen, which isn't massive, but it's not small, this application fills up the entire page. Now, it's still responsive, everything still adjusts, it still looks okay, but in Power App size, this screen size is considered a 4. And if I were to open this in, let's say, an iPad here or a tablet, this is also considered a 4. And now all of a sudden I have all of this empty space that is now compressed or that I have to fill if I'm just opening it up in the web. So I tend to put some parameters around what the maximum could be. So that way, every time I view my application, regardless of the device, it never gets blown up to the point that it's illegible or I need to have so many formulas to dynamically adjust font size and things like that. So if you select your screen, you come to advanced. If you look at the height property over here, this is in there by default. We're going to put something a little different that basically puts a cap on what we can have here. So in the height property, we'll say if app.height is less than 1100, then we want to take the app.height, meaning if it's less than 1100, great, dynamically adjust to any value below 1100. But once it goes above 1100, so if it's greater than 1100, we want to stop at 1100 and we want to determine this value to be 1100, right? And so we'll do the same thing for the width. And basically what this does is it just caps how big your application can get. So app.width, app.width, and we'll assign a different value for the width. We'll say, and you can put whatever you like here. It's sort of arbitrary, but I tend to use like 1500. So now if we play this application, now this is in the window size and we have comparable space to the side here, comparable dimensions of our application. So small tip that I like to use that helps me feel safe when developing the application, knowing it's never going to be distorted on someone's device. The second thing is working with galleries. So galleries can be a little tricky to make responsive, and I'm not going to dive too deep into the specifics of making it responsive, but something that I think is a decent tip when it comes to adding them to containers and making sure that you can see all of your information. So for example, if we play this, we view this on a mobile device, and let's just go into one of our records here. We're going to pull up our details. Actually, no, I just want to view the gallery. So I'm going to turn this sideways. One of the tougher things to develop in Power Apps is making this part responsive. So if I scroll to the end of this gallery, I get all 8 of my records to show, but the reality is there's another piece under here for my pagination buttons that aren't showing. So here's a quick tip to make sure that everything always shows. So if we exit out of there, because we want to make sure that this part, this container shows, right? I couldn't go to the next page. So if you select your gallery, the first thing that you want to do is control the dynamism I don't even know if that's a word. We want to make sure that this is the template size is dynamic to the container that it is filling, right? So if we select here, we go into our advanced properties, display. The first thing we want to do is come out to our minimum height. So right now it's statically set at 200. One thing you can do to make sure this always adjusts and fills the space appropriately is count rows self dot all items, close parentheses, times the template height. So right now our template size is 60. So you can just multiply this by self dot template height. So that way it's just going to multiply however many items are currently visible by the template size. So it always fills the gallery top to bottom, right? That's a decent way to help make sure that displays properly. And then within the container that the gallery sits, we want to make sure that this vertical overflow property, which is set to hide by default, is set to scroll. So that way, if there's anything that's off the page or it can't fit by default, it will scroll and show you the rest. So now if we play it, we should be able to get everything now at the bottom. Yep, perfect. So now we get our buttons as well. And now the last thing that I think really helps with development of responsive applications is what you might have noticed is this little container that I've put up here. I tried to make this resemble what you see when you play your application and you change your device right here, right? It's kind of the same idea, but the reality is anybody who's developed responsive applications in Power Apps knows that you kind of need to hit play to test and change the device to see if what you developed worked. Whereas if with a couple little changes, you can change the layout of your application in the editor to respect different screen sizes, 1 through 4, so you can see and get immediate feedback. So the way that we do that is we select our screen, we come to advanced, and well, actually first, let me give these two buttons, these two icons here, some values on select. So we're going to set a variable. So we'll just say var screen width, and we'll give it, so this will be the tablet icon. So we want to give it tablet dimensions. So the width could be 1366. And we'll also do the same thing for the var screen height, and we'll make that 768. And I think Copilot gave me these values. So these are also arbitrary. You can set them to whatever you like, but we'll come to the the phone icon over here, and we'll do the same thing, but we'll give it phone dimensions. So for the screen width, we'll do 386, and we'll keep the height at 768. So now, and I'll select this to set one of these. We'll make it tablet dimensions. And now we're just going to put these variables into and temporarily into the screen height, right? Because we have our code here that we put in earlier, but temporarily while we're developing, we can just do variable screen height and variable screen width. And so now as we toggle these, it will actually toggle in our Canvas app editor. So if I hit phone, it now adjusts to a phone, and I can see that responsiveness here. And now I can develop it in real time, so I don't have to keep playing and coming back and playing and coming back. This kind of gives me a better workflow. All right, I think I'm doing pretty good on time here. I have one more example that's going to go through patch and error handling that I want to show you. So I'm going to flip to a second application. This is a desk hoteling or desk booking application. And also just to note, I'll make both of these applications and solution files available. They'll be posted to our team SLG GitHub shortly after this session today. So you'll be able to download that and look through this and use them and do what you like. But this application is primarily designed to book desks, right? To reserve a spot to work. So we have our location in our first gallery. So then we select our location. Then it shows the associated available desks at that location for the date that I have selected. When I select book, that brings me to a confirmation modal. And in this modal, we have our desk record, the location, and most importantly, we have a disclaimer, right? You need to check this box before booking. And we're all probably familiar to this. It gives us information about cancellation policy, or maybe if you're charging money, all of that sort of stuff could be part of your disclaimer. But the point is, we don't want people to be able to make this booking if they haven't checked that box. So if I try and select book, you'll see that my font turns red, and I have a big indicator up here at the top that says, hey, error, you need to acknowledge this checkbox before proceeding. Once I select it, everything goes away. I could then proceed with booking, and that will patch that record through. And if we flip over to our booking screen, I can see my booking that I made here, and we can go beyond that next time. But the idea here is we're going to talk about that error handling piece. So let's head over to our demo screen where all of that code has been stripped out, and we'll get to our modal. So we'll follow a similar flow. We'll select our desk. And now if I select book, nothing's happening, right? I'm not patching anything. I'm also not getting any error messaging. So the first thing that we want to do is for our book button, we're going to put in our patch code. And you can do this a couple different ways. This is just one example. There's certainly not like a one size only sort of thing. This is just a different flavor of how you could go about it. So firstly, we're just doing a quick if statement that basically says if our checkbox is checked, then we can go ahead and submit or patch this record through. We've successfully done what we've asked them to do, and we could proceed with actually patching this record. So we start with if, and then we call our checkbox, which is called check disclaimer 2 in this case, and we want to make sure that it is checked. So if it is checked, then the true response is, and you guys are familiar with this piece, I'm going to hide some of these containers. So bar confirm desk booking. We're setting that to false. And we're also going to hide something else, the desk booking container, basically just resetting our screen. Yeah, container. False. Okay, and now we get into our patch function. And so I could just do this, just type it out. So we'll do patch, right? We're going to patch our record through. And if you remember, we're going to state our data source, comma, and then since this is going to be a brand new record, defaults, we're going to call our data source again, reservations, close parentheses. And now within our squiggly brackets in JSON format, we're going to indicate the columns in that data source that we want to update, and we're going to assign the data that we want to push through to those columns. So the first one is the reservation date. And this is being dynamically selected from our date picker. So date picker 2 dot selected date. You could put in today, you could put in a fixed date, but in this case, we obviously want to dynamically pick it up from what they've selected. So now we do our next field. The next field is the employee, and I'll format this here in a moment, and we'll go back through it. Employee, and so we want to dynamically pick up the user of our application. One of the beauties of using Canvas apps is somebody logs in to use it, so you can pull their info and we can match some of their details up with the data in our user table, so they don't have to enter their name or any other information. They can just navigate through and do what they need to do. So for the employee column that is associated with this reservation, we will be looking up in our users table, comma, and we're going to match this up with the primary email column from the users table that equals user, open, close parentheses, dot, and now we have a few data points about our current user that come default with Canvas apps. We can see their email, their full name, and their image. So now I can just select email, and that's going to match them up and set my employee record for this field. Close the parentheses. comma. And now we have our last field, which is our actual desk that we are reserving. So the reservation desk, and this is another record from a separate table that is related to reservations. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take what we set as the selected desk, much like we did with the selected user in the previous example, as our record that we'll be patching through. So now we can close our squiggly bracket, we can close our table here, and now we are in the false portion of our if our checkbox is checked. So if it's true, perform everything we just entered. If it's false, if it's not checked, this is when we want to update our error messaging to display and not patch anything. So we will update context, open parentheses, open squiggly bracket. Name of our variable is var checkbox error, and we will be setting that to true. Close, close, and now we close our full PowerFX code. So if we highlight this, you can format the text down here in the bottom left. Some people like to leave it in a list like that. I kind of prefer it to be displayed this way. So a quick tip there to format it once it's accurate code. All right. So just to review really quickly, if our checkbox is checked, then on true, we want to hide a few containers. We want to patch our record as a new record within the reservations table. And if none of that, or I'm sorry, if the checkbox is not checked, then we don't want to do any of that. All we want to do is update the context of this variable. So now let's make sure the other components respect the update of this context variable. So the first thing we want to do is change the color of this text. And, you can really indicate however, you could show a message, hide a message, change the color. You can do what you want to indicate that whatever your validation needs are. But in this case, we'll just change the color of this text to red. So if that variable that we just set, error, and you can say equals true, but that's kind of redundant. You can just say if and then list out your variable, and that's assuming it's true. And our checkbox is not checked. So check disclaimer 2 dot checked. Then we want the color to be red. Otherwise, we want the color to be black. So we can test that really quickly. There we go. So we hit book, and now our text is red. If we check it, we indicate that we have now satisfied the requirements, and we can change the color back. In addition to our text being red, I made a custom error message. So here's a little quick container. I'll just set this to true momentarily so you can see that this is a container that I created. So maybe if you wanted a custom look, a custom feel, you can design this yourself. There are out-of-the-box ones using the notify function. I find that these are a little bit more modern if you wanted to create your own, but there are ones available to you by default out of the box that are extremely handy. So instead of this being set to true, we want this to dynamically show as well based on that same value that this is turning red on. So we'll come back to our container and we'll do our checkbox error code being true and our checkbox not being checked. Right? And we're indicating that it's not checked by putting a exclamation point in front of it, right? That's equivalent to not. So now these are both visible. If we select our record, we satisfy it, and then we can book this record. So now you'll see it loading, and we can come to our bookings, and we have our fourth desk in there. All right, let me flip back. Because I wanted to share a couple quick things before we wrap up. So I wanted to share a couple quick things about error handling because there's a couple unique things to Canvas apps that I think are worth knowing, and even things that I learned, putting this session together. So the first one is there is a built-in error function. So you can leverage that built-in error function to return a table of error information for a specific data source. And this checks for errors after you perform a data operation. So after you submit a form or after you try and patch a record, it can let you know. There was also the isError function. The isError function checks if the value inside of one of your controls is an error, right? So if something's supposed to be a number and they put a string, you can configure this to determine that there is an error. And this is really useful for validating data before the data operation is performed, before you're submitting a form, before you're patching a record. And then one thing that is brand new to me that I actually would like to try, no pun intended, is the try function. The try function is new to me, but apparently it allows you to attempt an operation and catch any errors that occur without actually trying to perform the action. So it's attempting to, but not actually. So you're going to avoid patching bad data to your data source or crashing your application. It's just going to simulate running your code, but then giving you feedback on, hey, is this going to be successful or are there errors? So it's extremely useful. And then that last one that I was sort of mentioning that is built into the platform is the out of the box notify function that will display a message to the user on success or on error. So an example of this might be something like this, right? You might try patching a record into your customer's data source, and then on success, you'd like to notify, and you can put in a custom message here, right? Like record created successfully, or if it's failed to create the record, and it's going to show you an out of the box drop down notification. So let me pause there and maybe pass it back to Deb and see if there are questions or feedback. I did not look at the chat at all, so hopefully my counterpart Tim was keeping an eye on that.
He was doing an excellent job. Thank you, Kelly. I did put a survey in the chat. If you could please take a moment to give Kelly feedback, that would be helpful for us in upcoming sessions. And I can go ahead and unmute the mics too. We have a few moments here for some questions. So as I work on that, actually, I'm going to stop the recording first.
Sounds good.
Open it up for questions.